Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Lorandom podcast. I'm your host, Peter Baumann, the editor-in-chief of Lorandom. And today we are continuing our special Friday podcast episodes with a really interesting conversation with Dr. Mimi Nguyen. And as always, these are companion episodes to our Monday editorials. And this Monday, we had a really special piece that was months really in the making with Alexander Mordvintsev and the incredible Carl Sims. They had a fascinating conversation about A-Life and its potential for today that I really enjoyed. Mordvintsev compared A-Life today to NeurIPS 20 years ago. So super interesting conversation. But today I'm very fortunate to chat with Mimi, someone I have a huge amount of respect for and who's had an incredible year in 2025, which we go over in the call, but from opening a new gallery in London to fully participating in the global fair circuit to the digital sector in Perry Photo to now 010 at Art Basel Miami, and on top of having two galleries and an online space as well. It was a busy year. We also talk about sentiment and mismatches or potential mismatches with reality or creative reality today. I get her take on outreach and growing the space because she's really there on the ground and at the forefront doing it. Really, I think she's one of the most pertinent people to ask a lot of these questions to. So I'm really excited to not only have this chat, but to share it. So let's begin. Yeah, let's start with why you're here. And yeah, a really interesting and I think unique background. You have a PhD from Imperial College. And yeah, can you tell us about maybe that experience and then how that led you to becoming, where you are now, this gallerist and representative?
The biggest challenge for me was even before the PhD. So I was studying statistics and it was called quantitative method. So it's basically econometrics and stats, which actually is quite helpful to understand generative art because a lot of generative artists, pioneers, they were mathematicians. So there is kind of like this background there. But then in the same time, I was studying in art school. So I was doing like basically two majors in different schools, one in economics and one in the art school in Poland, in Berlin, and then in UK. And art was always my, let's say, hobby, I would say. So something that I would do on the side. And then, of course, I would work in finance because that's where you go when you study maths. The PhD came because I found finally a combination, a direction that was bringing these two worlds together. It was PhD in design engineering under the Faculty of Engineering. So there are elements, of course, of design theory, and it was in partnership with Royal College of Arts, one of the really good schools, art schools in UK, but also have like a very strong engineering foundation from the Imperial side. And what I realized that it kind of helps me a lot now when I'm dealing with both art and tech, because even like on things like designing a booth and understanding the power and the lumens that are emitting from LED video walls and stuff, like having kind of this more engineering mindset helps setting up the technical side a little bit easier. NFT kind of came during this PhD, and it was really fascinating for me because it was touching. I could understand suddenly that I can have a career, professional career, oscillates around art, but also uses my background in tech engineering and maths.
That's kind of how you got into your initial like forays into NFTs. Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, of course, I got into NFTs because of crypto and DeFi. So I got in crypto in late 2017, and of course, naturally, there were the times of Rarible for me, and it was kind of like the very early beginning. I got scammed a few times, and I had a break. And in the meantime, I got a job at St. Martin's, which is the University of Arts London. And I started to invite a lot of NFT artists to speak to my students. And that's kind of like how I start to even learn more about their practices and NFT art in general. And this is kind of where I started working with Verse as a founding member, bringing kind of the network that I built up through actually my university that I teach at.
So when was that you were introducing your students to artists? And do you remember like which artists those were?
The first one was Simon Denny. We had a symposium in 2021 with Arthur Brightman from Tezos, Simon Denny, someone from Sotheby Metaverse. So that was kind of the early on. That was when Alex was still in Flash Art. So there was more Trat, because that's kind of like how we wanted to start that. It was like a university-wide symposium. And then, of course, in 2022, we expanded that into a series of different talks with Robert Alice, with Mario Klingemann and Matt Deloria, Operator. But the first one was very early 2021, and I still think it was quite a magical moment.
Yeah, that was a very different time, 2021.
Yeah.
A magical moment. And that kind of leads to this the next question, which is that, I'm just curious about how overall you kind of see the space and understand the space, because people can tend to get a little bleak, especially on Twitter when crypto prices go down. But then that seems to, especially these days, be in contrast to what I feel like is a lot of vitality in the space, a lot of inroads that we thought might take years but are happening now in just 2025 that are pushing the space forward in really interesting ways that we'll also talk about and get into. Yeah, there just seems to be this disconnect between something that's fairly arbitrary, which is like a price movement of currencies, and then something that isn't arbitrary, something that is tangible that you can actually see happening, which is that this movement is really beginning to kind of flourish, especially on the digital side. So I'm wondering, how do you see that disconnect, and how do you think about what's happening now in the digital space with art and that sentiment?
That was funny, because in that first talk I did, where in 2021, someone at the panel said that the crypto prices will not affect the art prices. And that was actually someone from Tezos. So we all know what happens now a few years later when, things were worth hundreds of thousands. And of course, because of the exchange rate, they are, nominally worth less now, which was a very interesting comment, actually. I think the disconnect for me, it's actually less about the pricing, but about what we socially perceive as art, because there is this market-driven, as you said, signal that defines, what is a high-value asset, also, called as art. And that's not something that even, just in our space, but also in the traditional art where, you have paintings for millions, and no one understands why it's going for that for young emerging artists. There is still lack of, a set of protocols or common understanding between how we actually value these pieces, because they are often driven by big voices on social media or Excel tables in someone's, in a funds analyst, and they, being indexed. And of course, that's kind of like is represented very clearly through Blur when you don't even see the image, because it doesn't matter. So it's quite funny, because on one side you have traders who are defining actually market movements. And again, I don't think this is something bad, because this is what's happening in every market, actually, in traditional market, in luxury goods market. But we have also a very big issue with the definition of taste. And on the other hand, the biggest struggle for me is, bringing that to the traditional art world, because, there's this whole news about like crypto art entering Art Basel. So this is kind of like the first time that we are on the main floor of the Grand Slam of the art fairs. And from my side, when I'm trying to showcase new media, different media like smart contract as a medium, and maybe less focus on the JPEG side of the art, but more on the concept of the side, then I just read today that it's a word salad what we're trying, and it's kind of like led through the need that I am communicating with a slightly different audience now. We're talking with traditional art collectors, traditional art curators, traditional art journalists, and I'm kind of working along the lines there. Whereas, the other side that we have, which is social media, should actually be translated into that. And then at the end, it doesn't matter because, there's such a big taste division of, is art, something that just visually looks good, or something that is conceptually strong, or something that just sells well.
Yeah, there does seem to be a bit of a disconnect between sometimes like social media influencers accounts and tastemakers, and then what's happening in the contemporary art world. And it does seem like if there was a greater facilitation and dialogue between those entities, that it would improve the system generally. Well, I wonder how you think about the sustainability of the current ecosystem. I think you have a good sense of it as someone who's deeply entrenched. So yeah, what do you think about how do you think about how sustainable this is, and maybe any sort of directions that you see it going in that way?
So for me, it was interesting to learn about this space from a platform point of view when I was at Verse, because of course platforms have different rules, and it's very guided by the market. So and of course we were in a really nice time, like 2022, 2023, where it was just very exciting to present, for example, emerging artists who, coming up and introduce them to a wider group of collectors. Whereas now, when there's a different market, as you said, there is, the filter has kind of focused a lot on liquidity of specific names of artists. And that is very aligned actually with, as you said, the sustainability of the whole system, because if things are driven mainly by, and especially in the art world, in the whole, knowledge space about art, and when it is driven mainly by the level of liquidity of an asset, which is the artwork, in this case, it could seem a little bit short term, and it kind of takes away everything that art has to offer. So and that kind of, we can see that the movements that are happening are often in favor of things that are more liquid than, for example, things that are more experimental. And I understand it because it's a more risky investment, of course, from a collector's point of view. So for the whole digital space to kind of last longer and to actually make a standpoint for a wider art world, it is very tricky right now, because we can't offer interesting works because such artists, they don't get enough support if they're experimenting with things that are so conceptual and so difficult to explain on Twitter, and so difficult to even, fit in these 280 characters. It's easier for me to get these works into a museum to actually sell them. But, on the other hand, artists need also to survive as human beings. And if we cannot support practices like that, we'll just end up with, icons that are tradable. And it will just take longer for us to kind of, make a case of blockchain as a medium, or in general of digital art.
Yeah, so it seems like one of the ways to make the space more long-term sustainable is for there to be better education about some of this experimental work, and then also for maybe collectors to also consider work that is more on the experimental side. And
I don't want to bash people on that. I mean, I completely understand their situation, because it's not just, like the market is bad. The whole market is bad. I mean, the tech stock is going down. So people in general just have less disposable income. And just to tell someone to buy something that is by an emerging artist that is also very difficult to explain to even your friends, it's really a hard sell. And I understand why, parting with few thousands of your household income, it's just too big a question to ask people. And that's why I think this is kind of like a moment, and I'm quite excited, where institutions do look at this, as we talk, experimental pieces, the pieces that look specifically into blockchain as a medium. And hopefully that will last longer, and in 10 years we'll look back and we can say, oh, this artist was acquired by this museum, and there was like a signal. So, people, like normal people, will follow these traditional signals, and that is actually a very interesting way to onboard more people to our space.
I think museums can get like a bad rap sometimes in this space, but they don't care about the liquidity. They do actually care about the content and the concept of the work. And yeah, I do think they're an important signal in that way. And well, speaking of museums, I mean, you've had a big year yourself, you and your gallery. You pronounce your last name Nguyen, right? Like Nguyen?
You should pronounce Nguyen, but I say Nguyen myself. It's easier.
Okay. Nguyen Wahed, I mean, it's had a huge year. I mean, you've had also work that from artists that you've represented that has gone into museums, so you know about that firsthand. You've been on the part of the global gallery circuit. You've had this new London gallery opening. You just finished up at Perry Photo. You've got Nada Miami coming up. You've also got Art Basel Miami coming up with this new 010 and digital section. Basically constantly shows, or most of the time you have shows in your physical spaces in New York and London. You have online shows that are not throwaways, like with artists like Lauren Lee McCarthy. And so you've had a busy, I think, full year. Yeah, so I'd just like to know, looking back a little bit, what have you learned, or like what are your like takeaways from this year? What do you think that your actions this year have revealed about the space?
Oh gosh, yes. When you listed all of these things, it sounds like I'm a mad person, and the year was actually quite long. When the year ends, I think we will be through 7 art fairs this year, which is the worst, like the craziest thing that I cannot regret the amount of travels that I had to do, and of course flying back and forth to New York every month was also quite challenging as well. What I actually learned is that I was going with the speed or the pace of a platform almost. As you said, there were so many shows and releases and online shows and art fairs on top, and especially in a market like the one this year, it calls for like a longer reflective process. And this is why I opened the London location, because I wanted the shows in New York to take longer time to brew and to actually get some some communication out. So like there's a show that I did with the Polish government right now in New York, and it's still running. It's 2 months. And that allowed us to, reach out to press and get traditional mainstream press, because if there's a show for a week, there's no chance we can get, a running printing issue of Brooklyn Rail that is covering and reviewing the shows. And also that helped me also to connect with museums and to collectors, because they can always come back. We had a show with Leander Herzog for 2 months as well this year. And I remember Jeff Davis came literally on the last day. So it was just the fact that the show was running so long. People could, there are always people in New York. So they somehow happen to be people, transiting or visiting. And it's nice to see people who are able to just coincidentally be in New York and then see shows. We had like CD Vanetti, who works with Andreas Gisin, visiting QBB show. And, it's not like he flew especially for the show, but he happened to be in New York that week. And so that's something that I'm really kind of looking forward. Of course, you need to balance that with survival of the gallery if the show is running so long. And of course, thinking of the cost of running a physical space in a city like New York and London. And what I really tried to do this year with art fairs was, we started with a very young gallery. It has 1 year, and I just really wanted to test and see how is it to go to all these art fairs and talk to people and get the name out. Actually, Perry Photo was one of the most fun weeks I had, because we always put into this digital sector, which is quite frustrating, because we're already being put, I don't know, like this is like a weird something small new that is on the side, and the traffic is like 1/10 of what is happening on the main sections. And just the fact that it's already labeled differently gives people some bias when they approach the booth. But in Paris, what we did is we just went down the line, black and white, photography. When we spoke with Treda last year about it, like we actually planned that the work were supposed to be so slow in movement that you even wouldn't notice that they are moving. And that's exactly what happened. People were approaching the booth, and even after like 5 minutes of talking to me, they just realized that the work is moving. And this is kind of like the easiest way to explain to them what is digital art, because they're like, oh yeah, that's just like black and white portrait. And then I came and said, oh shit, this is digital. Like how do I show this? And this started a lot of conversations then. And I think the average age of people that I sold this year in Paris Photo was literally 75, which is amazing. It's fascinating. I never had this before. And it's a very slow process. And I hope artists understand that, because 2 years ago when we were in Paris Photo, of course, the work that went to a Parisian collector was a luminogram, traditional photographic technique, analog technique, in the made in the darkroom. That's something that they resonate with and they're familiar with. But that was one work. So, every year it gets a little bit better. It's like from 1 to 4. Hopefully next time it's fine. That's something, fingers crossed, for Art Basel. And I think that's good enough, because they will tell their friends. I came to this 85-year-old guy in Paris house and installed the USB into his screen.
Oh, wow.
This is what his friends will see in his house.
Yeah.
And this is how, we have a chance to grow our space. Otherwise, it's just gonna be us on Twitter shouting at each other.
Yeah. Please no. I'm also wondering, like, after you've accomplished so much this year, how will you kind of package all that and take it moving forward? Like, what will the next year be like? Will you go to as many? Do you feel the need to go to as many of these fairs? How are you thinking about like the future now that you've had such a big 2025, I guess?
I think for sure I will have to revise each of the fair and then really be picky of where we're gonna go, where I'm gonna spend 9 days out of my life sitting in a booth. What actually gives me a lot to think, and I'm trying to speak to a lot of people about it, and both from the artist side and the collector side. What is the role of a gallery? What is the role that the artists expect me to focus on, and the collectors as well? The dream that I actually, when I set it up, I really wanted to place the right works in the right hands, which is something that has to be built over years. So there are some collectors that I've been working with for the last 3 years, and I understand their taste and I know what is their collection. It's not like they're buying every single piece, and that's the point, because I want them to get the piece that fits most with what their values are and what they represent, and not just force people down their throats with pieces that they don't want. So that's something that of course I think will take many years, and would be nice if I could sell to their kids. Right now I'm selling to someone's to Fanny's parents, which is again quite really cool. And then maybe in 10 years her kids will be collecting digital art as well, and understanding the family collection is really quite an exciting role as a curator. So with artists, I am really trying to rethink what is the thing that they want me to keep working on, because I realized that my role became quite technical. When I'm selling a painting or a sculpture, the object just appears in the gallery. I'm hanging this up and that's it. And then my only thing is like, okay, I need to just ship it to someone. Sometimes I just Uber the thing. But it becomes a real-time generative artwork on blockchain. It's me learning how to set up an LED wall with 100 cables behind each panel, and then mapping. It's so technical that suddenly I realize that I'm a tech support person. We recently learned with Blender how to even swap a panel in an LED wall, because one pixel was broken. It kind of changes the whole function and job of a gallery, because I'm not just shipping things in crates anymore, but we're actively involved also in the production of the piece. We're deciding how people are experiencing the piece. Is it on, this type of screen or this kind of immersive display, or is it on the iPhone? I don't know, little things like that. But that's the decision that actually influences, purchasing behavior. And I'm actually curious, what do you think? What do you think is the next model of a gallery?
Yeah, I think that's interesting how these how like the realities of a digital gallery today and basically what you need to achieve in terms of presentation, and that your background is specifically kind of helping you for better or for worse, yeah, as like the tech person. But yeah, I think that that's true, that gallerists, if museums are struggling to like kind of integrate the digital in because of all the technical problems and the lack of people who have those skills, I think galleries are going to struggle even more. They have to be even more nimble and even more adaptive. And so, yeah, they really need people, either you or someone, a team that has like some like the skills, that the technical and sort of taste and connection skills that you have.
But they won't be able to hire these people. I think this is the problem. I mean, with AI, this helps a lot. But let's say a few years ago, to hire a technical person, an industry like art industry, or let's say museums or universities, you can compete with salaries that are in the tech world. With my PhD, I could work in the department of optimization in Amazon. And, you know, it just has a very clear ladder that goes up after 3 years, and it's very high because it's a strict. I mean, I was interviewing to a department that was specifically optimizing warehouses, and the only people that were allowed to interview were PhDs from Imperial and Oxbridge and ex-military people. So that's already like a very good filter of who is going to these departments. You know, the same with AI artists. I mean, good AI artists have enough skills to go to DeepMind and work on them. The salaries are 300K salaries. And this is the problem that business schools, I know this because I'm teaching the university, business schools, for example, are fighting for people, you know, intelligent people from economics. These people, again, can go to Goldman Sachs for like each $500,000 salary, or teach in a university for like a tenth of it. So you have to kind of level out that. So, you know, like all this MBA schools, they dragged up the salaries that an entering junior professor in a business school is exactly the same salary as a Goldman Sachs analyst. It's fascinating. And we can never match that in the art world because, yeah, or maybe, as I said, maybe with the use of AI, it's going to slightly help, and people can faster actually pick up this technical knowledge. And I mean, it helps me a lot actually as well, like, you know, to learn how to quickly code in a Raspberry Pi. Again, another annoying thing to do, but I guess like in the future it's going to be even more automated, and people will be able to deal with, like art people will be able to deal with technical things even easier.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of just how companies had to adjust to the internet. I mean, how companies are going to adjust to this new suite of emerging technologies that's now powered by AI is really going to be interesting. But like a lot of these traditional galleries are nowhere near even getting to the point, it seems, of even thinking about these questions. So there's at least, it seems like, some space to gain an advantage. And then part of that could be, yeah, I'm also interested in how you see this space-wide or scene-wide endeavor to reach out to the public and grow. And do you have any insight into which fairs or which exhibitions, or just in your experience, which have been particularly successful in terms of that outreach? You mentioned Periphoto. What you have done this year, which has been a lot, like what does that tell you about sort of outreach and growing the space?
For sure, time helps a lot. So Periphoto, as I said, this is the third edition that I won, and the third year in a row that has a digital sector. So again, if you keep going to Periphoto as a visitor, you pretty much get used to it. After 3 years, you're like, oh, okay, these guys are showing some digital stuff. But for example, I went to like a bang on traditional fair, which is Art Brussels. And I wasn't in the digital sector because there is none. That's impossible. And to be fair, I didn't show digital art. I did actually. Sorry, no, I did show Sophia Crespo and Anna Riddler, but it was through this photographic paper installation. When they speak to me, I showed the digital part of it, but there was like a 2.5 meter big installation of 84 analog prints on photographic paper. And this is something, again, that was easier for them to understand and then to approach the booth, because if they would see a big TV, it would be quite tricky. And fairs like, you know, Nada Villa, Warsaw, it's very I mean, there's just paintings there and sculpture. So when I had a big LED wall with Lu Yang, it was just so confusing for people. They didn't even know what to do with it. different techniques, because I came with an artist that is known to these people. Like, it's an artist that twice was in Venice Biennale and once representing a Chinese pavilion. They heard about it. This is someone that they read in Art Review, Art Forum, Flash Art, all of these articles. So that helps, of course, to start conversation, at least with institutions. And I hope that the Art Basel one will continue, of course, for years and years. I believe it will take 2 years at least to get people just familiar with it, and then slowly they will get more confident to invest in that. And of course the pricing has to be right, because if we're throwing a price that is almost matching a price of a Rothko piece next door, of course they would choose an asset of a dead artist that is very easy to resell in auction house in the future.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about whether it's even better to have it fully integrated like it was in Brussels, or have it separated. I'm also, so you've talked about taste and challenges with it, and your role as a curator and gallerist and representative is also shaping taste. And what is your approach to curating the group of artists that you want to work with and represent? Like, how do you think about which artists you want to work with?
So yeah, I mean, we are very, very young galleries. There are galleries that have 25 years at least operating and experience. But because we're young and we're dealing with emerging medium, it feels a little bit underground. That kind of reminds me of an art school. So you have a clique of people who come together and host their own exhibitions and kind of trying to do something radical. That's a little bit how this gallery came about, because I was just very close to a few artists and I like working with them, and we keep working with each other over like years and years now, and this is how it kind of pan out. People were asking me about like contracts, and of course like decision, who do I work with? It comes naturally because I got introduced to people through artists that I work with. We come together, we want to spend time together, and they support each other as well. When we had the first show with Adi, we had a group of like 8 artists flying over to New York just to kind of support her show, and actually the gallery. We're just doing like, very small, annoying tasks like washing dishes in the bucket. And that kind of shows that energy that I hope we'll be able to keep, because otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, you're a machine that is just, selling, releasing drops and to anonymous people. You won't have anything that kind of keeps and binds people together. Yeah, I mean, as long as we all have fun and I'm able to help artists to keep sustain their practice, and in the meantime also get people to have some nice stuff in their houses, that's kind of like something that I hope we will be able to do.
Yeah, and maybe this can be the last question. You mentioned that energy to keep up, and there's also, so we talked about how the excitement of the actual work and experimentation of the work is in contrast to at the moment falling crypto prices, but it's also in contrast to this economic depression that the traditional art world has been in for a couple of years now. And it's really starting, it seems like for a couple of years they were just trying to stay afloat, and then now in 2025 there was this precipice where a lot of them started closing, and the economic realities started hitting home in the traditional art world. And so I wonder how you see that energy in the digital space in contrast to the challenges in the traditional space right now.
I think that's like when you said that, because of course I was quite gloomy before as well, but when you said that, I realized, I mean, that's great, because of course we don't want this to happen to the galleries in our space, the galleries who started to open actually recently and have physical spaces, because this is basically, we're facing the same issues. But just learning about the fact, that Hauser & Wirth and David Zwirner are reporting like 90% decrease in their revenue, it just shows how, as you said, globally, this is a tricky moment for all galleries, not just our space.
Mm-hmm.
But gives a space, and sounds now gonna like a complete bullshit because I teach something like design thinking and speculative design in the art university. This is kind of like a space that what I'm normally tell students, like this disruptive innovation, like something has to change, and we all are, and I hope that I'll be able to learn quickly and adapt quickly to these changes, because something just is broken in the model, and I think that's just is reflected in all disclosures, as you said. We are a little bit luckier because we have slightly different cost structures as these galleries. You know, they have the logistic that go behind a gallery is just very, very expensive, and you know, it's a lot of little things that come together. We are blessed with a slightly different system, but you know, the more we pretend to be like a traditional gallery, the closer we are to these challenges. And it's going to be next is going to be very exciting year. And I spoke to a lot of contemporary galleries, you know, the ones that are dealing with Asian paintings, for example. They are revising that, and it's quite exciting to see what's going to happen next year with them revising. Like one of the galleries that I was looking up to for years now, I've been following all of their booths in Art Basel and Frieze, is Bank Shanghai, who actually represents Luyang. They closed their location in Shanghai. I mean, the gallery is called Bank Shanghai. They closed the location in Shanghai. They are sharing a location in New York with their friend gallery. And maybe this is the model. Like what we understand so far, that the gallery should be in Chelsea on the ground floor with a building that costs 1 million a month to rent. Maybe that's something that will have to go, because the reality is we're spending 8 hours on the phone anyway. So what's the point? So yeah, having this revision really helps. I think it's just going to, if we zoom out from like a Machiavellian, you know, point of view, it's gonna help us move forward. So yeah, it's horrible to hear about disclosures, and it is heartbreaking because it's a lot of art practices being now just left out there, are just being left without the galleries and the representing entities. But that means that there's gonna be an open space for new experimentation to come, and it will be quite exciting to see what's gonna pan out.
Yeah, it is sad. You'd hate to see it, but in some ways it might reflect a resistance to change, and then what the ramifications of that might be. Well, yeah, thank you so much. This was really interesting conversation. I do wish, I mean, I wish we always could go on for longer, but yeah, I think this was great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. And yeah, let's be in touch. And good luck in Miami. Okay.
Bye.